Of the original book, Loch Mey Monster. The second book, The Return of Loch Mey Monster, is called A Monster Blows In. And there's a prologue to this, which I'm going to read to you today. In the distant past, when the days were not numbered, many terrible monsters filled the earth and fought for their lives and the land they belonged to. Loch Mey Monster belonged to the land of Caithness in Scotland, and the land belonged to him. He fought to protect it, and his mythical, magical power gave life to the ocean and land and everything that lived there. No one understood what he did for the people. They were too busy fighting their own battles and telling their own stories. But there was one man who knew. Scary Scar. A huge man of almost living rock and endless strength who lived with his people on the banks of Loch Mey. Before he even met Loch Mey Monster, strange dreams had troubled Scary Scar endlessly. He dreamt of a monster so colossal and so terrible that even he, the greatest of warriors that walked the land, trembled. Even stranger, these dreams had told him that he must one day save the monster from certain death. Today, two children, Greg and Abby, lived in the land of Scary Scar, on a croft in the lowlands beyond the highlands of Scotland, on the banks of Loch Mey. They lived there with their mum and dad, their baby brother, Dolly the dog, and an awful lot of animals. Greg and Abby had found more than farm animals on their croft. They had discovered Loch Mey Monster. Benevolent, but extremely large and scary dragon. This ageless monster flew into the loch under cover of migrating geese, who made wonderful formations around his most invisible body. It was now some time since Greg and Abby's meeting with the monster, and something more terrible troubled them. It was Jimmy, their baby brother. He'd grown up. It was another windy day on the croft, and everything that could rattle rattled and banged and hummed for good measure. Greg listened and sighed as he sat on the edge of his bed, writing a list of his favourite friends, putting extra ticks for his very best ones. "You're not on my list," he sneered as he saw Abigail approach hopefully. Her big brown eyes suddenly lost their sparkle, then refound it as she noticed a piece of clothing from her Barbie doll and horse set nestled on the carpet. She turned back to her bedroom. Then, with a voice as loud as the wind outside, she screamed, "Jimmy! Jimmy! No, you can't play with that!" I can play with it. It's both of ours," Jimmy replied resolutely. "No, it's not. It's mine." "I don't like you anymore, Abby. I tell Daddy," Jimmy announced as he stomped off to the room. Jimmy was 4, going on 40, so his mum had said, when he was not supposed to be listening. He was either extremely happy or completely and wretchedly miserable. He was intelligent, sly, naughty, and yet irresistible. The wind seemed to be getting louder outside, and Greg watched some of the toys spinning around outside in the yard in a kaleidoscope of colour. They were soon joined by a large grey wheelie bin on its side, which seemed to be trying to eat them with its flapping lid. Up above, a passing seagull was trying unsuccessfully to pass by as it wrestled with the unforgiving wind, and Greg could hear his brother shouting something about animals on the roof. "I can hear animals on the roof, Abby. There are animals on the roof, Abby. Abby!" Jimmy shouted as he returned, unable to find his dad. "Animals? There are no animals on the roof, Jimmy. Just birds," Abby replied. "No, Abby, I can hear them. Listen, you never listen. Why do you never listen to me?" Abby decided she would listen, just to keep the peace. The wind was lifting the tiles up in quick succession, and indeed it did sound like there were animals on the roof. Great big ones, Abby thought. Cows, pigs, sheep, and maybe even reindeers, Abby hoped, thinking of Christmas. Jimmy watched Abby's face and began to smile and then laugh, and they both screamed together, "Oh no, animals on the roof!" Greg was trying not to listen. He was watching a strange scene outside. His mum and dad and another man he didn't know were grappling with a very large plastic bag. The bag seemed to refuse to lie down, so his dad was trying to bury it in the mud. This seemed to help, but Greg wasn't sure if the bag would be much good anymore. A tile from the roof suddenly smashed to the floor right outside Greg's window. Abby and Jimmy screamed even louder, and even Greg jumped, but he tried not to show it. "Oh no, no," Jimmy carried on. "It's just the wind, Jimmy, it's just the wind," Greg said calmly. Abigail and Jimmy joined Greg to look out of the window. "Let me see, Abby, let me see," said Jimmy, getting frustrated. Outside the window, they saw the shattered remains of the tiles strewn across the yard, and the smaller ones joined in a disjointed dance with the children's toys and the wheelie bin. "What's that bag doing, Greg?" Jimmy asked, watching his mum and dad. "It's a monster, Jimmy, and it's going to get you! Ow! Oh no!" Jimmy's face suddenly drained of colour, and he looked at Greg. "And then it's really going to get you." Greg reached out and tickled Jimmy. Jimmy realised it was a joke and laughed and screamed happily, then told Greg to get off me and stamped into his bedroom. "That's the greenhouse, Greg," said Abby. "No, the polytunnel, Abby," said Greg, suddenly realising what that large bag was. The polytunnel. The polytunnel was finally under control, in fact, under a mound of wet mud, a log, and a green fishing net. Greg's mum and dad trudged triumphantly towards the house, his dad stopping briefly to tie a piece of baling twine to a gate with only one hinge on. "I'm going to fly my kite," Greg announced. "It'll work really well in this wind." "It's not fair. I don't have a kite, and it's not fair. It's just not fair," Jimmy moaned, reappearing from his room. Maybe I'll go and see Binny," Abby said without conviction. "I think I'll go out later," Greg replied, as he watched a chicken fly over the shed roof, through the garden, and into a muddy pool in the field beyond. The chicken flapped and squawked, then noticed a piece of old bread thrown out for the starlings. In a moment the bread was gone, and she became engrossed in the contents of a nearby cowpat. The wind continued to thump against the walls of the old croft and test the wooden supports of the fence at the bottom of the vegetable garden. The calf in the barn moaned, to no one in particular, and the old workhorse helped the wind with some fence work, heaving her weight upon an already straining wooden rail. At dinner that evening, everyone discussed the day's events with enthusiasm and some exaggeration. "Me and Abby saw huge monsters on the roof, and one of them had a sword to cut through the roof," Jimmy explained. "It wasn't a monster, Jimmy, it was just some animals," Abby replied. "No, it wasn't, Abby. It was a monster. I saw it. It had teeth and wings like elephant's ears." "You always say that I'm wrong. Daddy, why is Abby always saying I'm wrong? Always?" "I don't know, Jimmy. Sometimes we see things differently. I thought the polytunnel would stay up, but Mummy thought it wouldn't. And Mummy was right," he said thoughtfully. "Yes, Mummy is always right," Jimmy exclaimed, "except when I try to pull open a sliding door and it falls on my head," she said, rubbing the bump. All the children laughed at once, and a series of events with chickens and horses and a ravenous wheelie bin were discussed raucously in quick succession. Apparently, when there are high winds, all the fishermen bring their nets out of the sea and put them in the air to catch the crofters' chickens blowing out to sea, said Dad, smiling broadly. Jimmy laughed, but Greg, worried and almost believing him, said, "They don't, do they?" "No, Greg, but it was so windy today I thought the sky would blow away." "No, Daddy," said Jimmy, "the sky is held up with nails that won't come off." The next day, the wind had slowed enough for the three children to venture out into the yard by the barn. There were leaves and hay and straw strewn up against the chicken wire, covering the duck pen, yet the ducks seemed untouched, gently gliding across the pond, their feathers ruffling slightly in the wind. There were 4 tiles missing from the roof, but no monsters or animals. Greg wondered if Jimmy had really seen Loch Mey Monster, but he didn't think so. Jimmy often made things up. "Look, the animals knocked the tiles off," said Abby. "The monsters cut them off with their swords," Jimmy said. "It's just the wind, you two. Come on, let's have a look around." "Was that a big wind, Daddy?" Jimmy said, passing his dad, who was heaving a large ladder from the barn. "Yes, very big, Jimmy," he replied. "Very big." "Wow," said Jimmy, and ran off to catch up with Abby and Greg. The wind had wriggled and squirmed and almost devastated the landscape. The tall fencing surrounding the goat field was sagging unevenly and was further hindered by the rising level of the water in the ground. The plastic wrapping on a large bale of straw had almost been ripped from it and created an oily slick in the air. Broken branches littered the vegetable garden. The chicken shed had lost half of its felt roof, and the plastic windbreak on the front fence was nowhere to be seen. "What a mess," said Greg dramatically. "Yes, what a mess," said Abby. "It's a mess, isn't it, Abby?" said Jimmy, beginning to smile. "Stop copying me, you two. Look over there." Oh, that's the hamper van," said Jimmy. The camper van roof was lying in one of the ditches that surrounded the croft, and was serving perfectly well as a perch for one of the many ducks on the croft. "Hello, duck," said Greg. "Off you go," he shouted, flinging his arms around in the direction of the duck. "Well, off you go. Come on, Abby, pull." Abby grasped limply at the roof. "It's too big, Greg," she gasped. "It's too big." Greg finally jumped onto the roof, which lolled around, half in the ditch and half in mid-air. "We need some rope to tie onto it," Greg said. "What?" said Jimmy. "Some rope," shouted Greg. "Some rope." "You need some rope, Greg?" asked Jimmy. "Yes, Jimmy." "Don't shout." I'm not talking now," Jimmy sulked, putting his arms down by his sides, looking down at his chest, and beginning to flap his arms up and down, huffing as he did so. "Come on, Jimmy. Let's see if we can get on the roof too," said Abby. "Come on." "No, don't. Don't do that." It was too late. Abby jumped to where Greg was hanging on, and slowly and deliberately they sank into the ditch, the roof now covering their heads. "Oh, Abby," Greg shouted miserably. Jimmy started to laugh, and seeing him made Greg laugh too. "Oh, Abby, you're always trying to kiss me. Yuck." Greg made a faint attempt at a war cry and leapt theatrically from the ditch in a twirl of legs, roof and water. Abby eventually found herself squelching in the bottom of the sodden camper van roof. Finally they managed to drag the roof out and balance it on a wheelbarrow to take back to the rest of the vehicle. "Where are all the cushions?" said Abby. "And the window?" said Jimmy, sounding knowledgeable. "I don't know, do I?" said Greg, becoming annoyed as he pushed the precarious barrow. "Leave to Daddy," said Jimmy. "He's heavier than the roof." "You mean stronger, Jimmy?" said Greg. "Yes, stronger," replied Jimmy. "Okay." Greg gladly dropped the wheelbarrow to the ground. Jimmy laughed and ran to find Dad. "Daddy, I found the hamper van. I found the hamper van. And Greg dropped it on the ground, Daddy. Daddy?" heavy sigh from the barn was slowly followed by Jimmy's dad, carrying a new hinge for the garden gate. "No, Jimmy," he said. "Daddy," Jimmy said again. "No, Jimmy," Dad said again. "Daddy, Daddy, 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 Daddy." "Okay, yes, Jimmy." "Daddy, why have you got that in your hand?" Jimmy asked, forgetting what he was going to ask. "The fruit garden gate's come off, Jimmy. Do you want to help me put it on?" "Maybe later, Daddy. Bye." The sun shone dreamily through the murky grey and white sky, and something moved across the loch nearby, slowly, very slowly, but still nobody noticed. Smoke poured out of the kitchen window as the southwest wind blew smoke back down the Rayburn chimney. The children were ushered out of the house, and Dolly, their shaggy dog, followed after them. "Come on, Dolly," shouted Greg. Dolly started to bark cheerfully and dance around the children as they all ran across the field. "Your nose can sniff out all the cushions, Dolly," said Greg. "She can sniff out everything, can't you, Dolly?" said Abby. "Why can't dogs sniff, Greg?" asked Jimmy. "Because they have big, black, wet noses," answered Greg, smiling. "No, that's not right. That's not right. That's not right, is it, Abby?" asked Jimmy, getting frustrated. "I don't know, Jimmy," said Abby, beginning to trot like a pony across the field. Dolly excitedly jumped the fence, entered the moorland where the loch was, and ran backwards and forwards until all the children followed her. "You're not allowed in here, Jimmy," said Greg. "I can, Greg. Don't say naughty things to me," said Jimmy, getting upset. "But Mum said you can't." But Jimmy's lip began to quiver, and tears welled up in his eyes, his big green eyes. Greg sighed. "Oh, okay, Jimmy, just stay close to Abby." "Yes, we'll be like two ponies, won't we, Abby?" said Jimmy excitedly, instantly recovering. Abby laughed and trotted along with Jimmy. "Wow, look, a deer!" exclaimed Greg. Dolly had scared a road deer from its hiding place in a large clump of gorse bushes. It quickly ran across the reed-decorated marshland and became invisible as it merged with the background. "Dolly, come here," shouted Abby. "Leave that deer alone, you naughty girl." Dolly came back with her tail wagging frantically, and then her body joined it until, as she reached Abby, she was upside down looking up at her. "Silly dog. Good girl, Dolly." Greg had spotted something among the tufts of grass and amongst the rushes. "What's that?" "Look, our cushions," he said. "Oh, they're all wet and horrible," Abby said, holding a squelchy cushion up. "Ah! Oh!" Greg squeezed one out onto Abby's head. "Ah! Oh! Greg!" shouted Abby. Jimmy laughed and laughed uncontrollably. And then, suddenly, he was gone. "Jimmy? Jimmy? Where are you, Jimmy?" "Jimmy?" said Abby. "Jimmy, where are you?" "Oh no, we're in trouble now. We've lost Jimmy."